Atlantis, the legend of a lost city. Sitting here under the shade of a lovely palm tree in paradise, ready to read the legend to you. First, there was chaos. From chaos sprang earth and heaven. From them came the race of Titans, all gods. Two of them, Kronos and Rhea, seized power and ruled over all. They had 3 sons. Their son Zeus overthrew them. Then he and his 2 brothers divided up the world. Zeus went to the heavens. Hades went to the realms of the dead, while the seas and the oceans went to mighty Poseidon, who promised to guard the waters with care. Floating on one of Poseidon's emerald seas was a small rocky island. Few visited its shores and nobody bothered to give it a name. But the sun rose warmly over it each morning and set sleepily behind it every night. In the centre of the island there stood a mountain, and at the foot of the mountain lived a man called Evenor and his wife Leucippe. They lived happily together, working hard to tend the barren land, and brought up their daughter Cleito to honour all creatures. Poseidon grew curious. How could they be so happy with so little? He took on human form and crouched unseen behind a rock to find out. Each morning at daybreak he watched Cleito walk over the pebble ground, barefoot and smiling, to fill her water pot at the stream. Seeing Cleito in all her beauty, Poseidon's heart grew tender, and one day he stepped out from behind the rock to talk to her. Day after day he came, and slowly she began to return his love. Finally she agreed to become his bride. Her parents, unaware that Poseidon was a god, blessed their union, and a simple wedding followed. But a god cannot stay hidden. After the wedding, all the spirits of the sea rose to the surface to sing, and Poseidon assumed his divine form once more. He vowed to rebuild the island and make it fit for a king and his queen. Poseidon used powers beyond human imagining to transform his island into a paradise. First he arranged alternate circles of land and sea, 3 of land and 3 of water, to enclose the mountain. Within each circle of land a forest spring sprang up. The trees bloomed and grew heavy with fruits, and creatures multiplied. Next he made a network of canals fed by waterfalls. Soon the island was yielding 2 crops each year. One was watered by the winter rains, and the other was irrigated by Poseidon's canals. The earth was carpeted with herbs and vegetables, and thick with healing roots, and from its depths men dug out priceless yellow mountain copper. All things flourished on the sacred island. Then, under Poseidon's guidance, the inhabitants built a palace fit for a god, with towers, gates and parapets trimmed with gleaming brass and tin. In the centre they set up a holy temple dedicated to Poseidon and Cleito, with pinnacles of silver surrounded by a wall of gold. They built thermal baths and aqueducts, fountains and gardens, and even a huge racecourse. It was a happy time for Cleito and Poseidon, and over the years Cleito gave birth to 5 pairs of twin sons. Their firstborn son they named Atlas. In the summer of his 20th year, he was crowned High King, and they named the island Atlantis in his honour. Then Poseidon divided the island into 10 parts and gave his sons 1/10 each. To ensure that peace reigned in his new island city, Poseidon set down laws in stone on a pillar of the temple. Chief among them was the commandment that no Persians should take up arms against another, with a terrible curse on anyone who disobeyed. So that means it's no fighting. When you take up arms, you don't fight. Every 5 years, Atlas and the 9 princes gathered by night beside the pillar to judge their people according to Poseidon's laws. The people of Atlantis became wise, gentle, and great-spirited. They were sober and kind, as the Creator had always wanted them to be. And above all, they lived in peace. So Atlantis prospered. Its splendid docks were thronged with ships and merchandise, and behind them a towering lighthouse lit the way for incoming boats, bringing cargoes from other lands. The harbours hummed with trade. Bridges and an underground canal were built to connect the 3 circles of land around the mountain, and the people grew ever richer. Poseidon, watching from the waves, was happy, and he went away to his home at the bottom of the sea. Excuse me. Many years passed, and Poseidon lay sleeping at the bottom of the ocean. The people of Atlantis began to change. Slowly, very slowly, the godlike part of their souls faded, and their mortal human natures took over. They started to argue. Gradually they lost the gift of goodness and became infected with ambition and power. Greed filled their hearts, and the streets of Atlantis, which were once safe, became dangerous as people began to steal, cheat, and lie. One day Zeus, god of gods, who ruled according to the law of the Creator, looked down from the heavens above, and he saw the city walls crumbling with neglect. That means that it's not being cared for. The empty temple, and worst of all, people fighting one another. He roared out his anger, and the sound of his fury woke Poseidon. Rising to the surface of the waves, the sea god looked out over his once perfect kingdom, and he wept. Now he had no choice. He must carry out his terrible curse. Raising his trident, he stirred the seas into a wave that rose so high it lashed the heavens. The wave vibrated with a roar that could be heard 2,000 miles away, and the earth trembled with terror. Gathering its full force, the wave crashed upon the land, while burning rain and ashes blistered down from above. And in a single day and night, Atlantis was swallowed up by the sea. Then there was silence. The city sank slowly to its new resting place on the ocean floor. The people of Atlantis did not die. They continued to exist beneath the waves, but they never spoke or quarrelled or fought ever again. As year followed year, they paid a terrible price, a terrible a penance. They learnt to live without gold or possessions in the cold depths, and in time they became little more than creatures of the water. To this day, Atlantis has never been found. Some people believe that it is still there under the sea, waiting to be discovered. So where was Atlantis? And at the back of this book, there's a little section that follows the actual legend, and it's just a little bit of information. Some people have suggested many different places where Atlantis might once have been. The oldest Greek legends describe Atlantis as being out to the west, in the middle of the ocean. The ocean that is still named the Atlantic after Plato's son. The people of Atlantis are said to have spread to other countries, founding settlements in Europe and Africa, and even in a land we now call America. Some people think Atlantis existed more or less as Plato had described it, that its people left traces behind them. Egypt has pyramids, Mexico has pyramids, so perhaps the Atlantean settlements built them in both places, and their submerged homeland was about between the two countries. Others suggest that Atlantis was closer to America. The inhabitants of the West Indies told early explorers that their islands were once part of a single landmass, but that a disaster long ago shattered it. The 5th century philosopher Proclus, who wanted to convince his readers that Atlantis was real, writes really mysteriously that he knew of the West Indies and their story. Some people suggest that Atlantis was part of Britain. Legend tells of a sunken land between Cornwall and the Isles of Scilly. The theory taken most seriously is that the story is actually about the island of Crete, which was highly civilised and ruled over several smaller islands. One of them, Thera, was partially destroyed in about 1450 BCE by a tremendous eruption, which also destroyed part of Crete, and its civilization never recovered. With so much uncertainty, some argue that the story of Atlantis is not a history at all, but a myth warning us of a conflict and power-seeking way. Yet the legend is so vivid that many will always believe that Atlantis existed somewhere. Atlantis, that was the legend of a lost city. What sort of ending was that? It was quite an unexpected ending that takes you by surprise, and for the people of Atlantis, it was quite a tragic ending. I hope you enjoyed that, and the next thing that you need to do is to finally complete your list of features for the lost city of Atlantis. Okay, I hope you enjoyed it.